Welcome to Alpha502, Introduction to Publishing with Alpha Anywhere. Publishing your Alpha Anywhere applications from your development environment to a test or production environment is a critical skill set. It is very important that you have a deep understanding of the process and techniques so you can confidently move your applications from development into test and production environments. In this course, we'll be covering the following core topics: explaining in detail the Alpha Anywhere publishing process, local publishing for verification and test, detailing the different methods you can use to publish your Alpha Anywhere application, a hands-on example where you can publish your application live to a test environment using the sample project included in the course, discussing setting database, storage, and operational environmental settings for publishing to different environments and different requirements, and general publishing techniques and best practices. By the end of this course, you will understand how the Alpha Anywhere publishing process works and the mechanics that are involved with that process. You will also be able to publish your Alpha Anywhere applications with confidence, speed, and reliability. I want to thank ZebraHost, the premier Alpha Anywhere hosting company, for sponsoring this course. ZebraHost is your go-to company when you need to host Alpha Anywhere applications. They have the experience, support, and expertise to make sure your Alpha Anywhere application runs smoothly and without worries. Welcome to Alpha Anywhere Introduction to Publishing. I want to take a few minutes to go over the course objectives. We have multiple objectives we want to achieve in this course. The first one is an overall explanation of how the publishing process works in Alpha. The goal is to give you a good understanding of the structure of what happens in publishing so that you'll be better able to manage that overall process and adapt it to your requirements. We're also going to go through the different methods that are available to publish from your local system to a target environment. We're going to actually go through a hands-on example so you can go through the process yourself and see all the elements working together. And we're going to talk about other publishing techniques and tricks that are available to make your publishing process as efficient, simple, and productive as possible. This course is sponsored by ZebraHost, an incredible hosting company with a deep understanding of the Alpha system. Why would you use ZebraHost? Well, as I mentioned, they're Alpha hosting experts. They understand how Alpha works, how to set up great hosting environments to do the best job with Alpha. They have enterprise hosting experience. They have handled very complex implementations of the Alpha environment and other environments. They have excellent pricing for both small starter solutions up to the largest hosting needs required. They also have outstanding support. They're there to make sure you're successful and you can focus your time on developing and producing and not spending your time on doing hosting tasks. And last but not least, they are dedicated to the Alpha community. They really participate heavily in the Alpha community, support it, and have been just a phenomenal group of people. So check them out. They're at www.zebrahost.net. And like the old ads, I'm not just a spokesperson, I'm actually a customer of ZebraHost and use it for all of my demonstration and hosting needs. The first thing I'd like to do is walk you through the application we're going to be using for our publishing course. As you can see here, we are currently on our home or splash page. It has our Alpha Sports logo, says we're on a system dashboard, and we have a button to click to enter the system. So I'll go ahead and click that. Now you'll notice we don't have any security enabled on this because we wanted to keep it simple. But once we've clicked on that, we're into the company dashboard. And this is a classic sort of interface you would see. You have a header area with a logo and a comment, along with a kind of a homepage area with some information. Down the road, you'd probably want to change this with KPIs or charts or add some other eye candy to it. You'll notice on the left-hand side, we have customers and directory. This is an expanding menu, and each of these are different functional capabilities of our dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead in here and I'm going to click directory. And you'll notice that it's opened up a report in this area here. And this is just a simple quick report I built using the tool. And you can see it's basically a customer directory grouped by customer. And I also included the ability to export as a PDF, Excel, Word, or printed as HTML. All these are native capabilities of Alpha Anywhere, but shows you how simple and easy it is to build a pretty powerful system and publish it quickly. The other elements is customer. In this case, I have a UX control that has a list detail view combo, and this is connected to my backend database to bring in customer data. So I can select a customer here, and you'll notice over on the right-hand side, we're seeing the detail for that customer. Currently, this is set up as a read-only interface, but it would be very easy to make this a full editable environment. Now, very important is this is connected to a backend database, and that's one of the key topics we'll be covering in publishing of how to manage that information. Now, one other thing to note is that I'm currently running it on my local system here, and that is just for the purposes of this presentation. We will show you how to run it locally on your local system like I'm doing at this point, or run it on your server. And we'll walk through every step of how to do that, along with all the nuances of how to change things so that when it's operating on that target environment, it operates the way you want it to be. What I'd like to do now is walk you through the structure of our application so you have an idea of the different elements that are associated with it. First, you'll notice we have two A5W pages. The first one is called index, and that is related to that first splash page that lets you into the system. The second one is called Home UX, which is really the one I'm using for my dashboard. And again, the Home UX is just hosting the Home UX component, and that's really all it's doing in the system. Now let's look at the different components that are made up of our solution. I'm going to go over here to reports, and you'll notice the first thing we do is look at our directory report. This is our quick report. Go ahead and open that up here. And you'll see it has a set of fields coming from our database, organized by selected fields, and then we have a grouping that's associated here. So the focus behind this is just a simple report, and in fact I can preview it right here. And you'll see this is our quick report that's in here. And it is data connected, and that's an important thing we want to talk about in this class, is how to handle the fact that you'll be using different data sources for when you're in development versus up on the server and or any of your other publishing environments. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to take you to web components. Again, fairly simple. We have two web components. The first one is called Home, and that's essentially my dashboard that displays the menu and the surrounding areas there. Then I have another component here called Customer UX. Let's look at that one first. I'm going to open up Customer UX. And you'll see that it is a UX component with a panel layout. It has two panel cards. The first one is called PC_list on the other left. The first one's called PC_list, which is on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, I have PC detail. And the reason it's structured that way is we're using a LTR, or left to right structure. And so this is when we click on that menu and it takes us in, we're going to be seeing our list of customers, and when we click on a customer, the detail there. Now let's go back to our Web Projects Control Panel, and let's open up our Home UX and look at that. This is our primary UX that's displayed. So once you go past the splash page, we take you to the Home UX A5W page, and this exists within it. And it's fairly straightforward. Basically, we also have a panel layout here, very similar to the previous UX structure. We have a panel header, which has our nice little logo and a text for the dashboard. We have a footer area here with static text, just kind of putting some information out there. And then from a structure, we have two panel cards. The first one's called PC Menu. It's on the left-hand side of the screen. And you'll notice that it has just one component in it, which is our main menu. Then we have another one here called PC Main, and that currently just has some static text. So when we first load this UX, you're going to see the menu and then the static text. And then there are a series of actions that occur with the main menu that open up our target UX or reports in PC Main. So let's go ahead and look at our menu real quick. I'm going to double click on this to open it up. And you'll see I've done the menu color so it matches. And then I'm going to click here for Menu Data Genie. The rest is pretty much so right out of the box. So I'm going to go to Menu Data Genie, and you'll notice that I have my two menu items, Customers and Directory. And let's go ahead and look at Customers. You'll see over on the right-hand side we have the on-click event. So that means when someone clicks on the menu item, it's going to fire this. And we click on that, and it shows us that all we're really doing is running an action. And you'll see in my training, if you've already been through it, you'll understand this. But if you haven't, we centralize all of the different actions that occur in a UX so that it's easier to manage, modify, and update over time. And again, all we're doing is putting a pointer to that action in our menu here. Go ahead and close that, and we'll look at Directory. And very similar, all we're doing is running an action called Show Directory. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. And let's show you how these actions work. So we'll go over here to JavaScript Actions, and you'll see here are my two actions. Let's go ahead and look at Show Customers. So I'm going to select Show Customers, and you'll see there's a little green here that says that it's been set up and ready to go. I'm going to click Edit Action. And so this is using our Action JavaScript Builder. And again, if you're new, this is where you put in different simple and complex actions. And we have one here called Open UX Component. When this runs, it's going to open a predefined UX component, in our case, the customer one, and display it. So I'm going to double click on that, and you'll see we select which component to open up. We then tell it where we want to open it up. In our case, we're opening it up in a panel. So when this is clicked, it's going to take whatever content is in this main panel right here and replace it with this UX. And that's really all there is to this action. So I'll click OK and save. Show Directory operates the same way, but instead of a UX, we're opening a report. And if we go in there, we're pointed to the report we want to, and we're saying open it up into a panel, PC main, and it'll override anything that's in that panel and show that information here. You'll also notice here that I can set up my selections for being able to print as PDF, Excel, Word, text, etc. Click OK and save. And I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here by clicking OK. So fairly standard, simple structure, but one that's very flexible, very easy to expand, and runs really nicely within the web browser. Now you have a feel for what the system does and how it's created. We can really now move on to how do we move this onto our local system for testing, and more importantly, onto a server for testing. Our first step for our training is to install the files we're going to be using for the training course. You'll notice that there is a download included in this lesson called Introduction to Publishing Files, and it's a zip file. So go ahead and download that to your machine. I have downloaded this to my desktop, but you can place it anywhere you would like. And now I'm going to either double click on it or I'm going to right click on it and say Extract All. This will open up a dialog box asking me where to do it. In this case, I'm extracting it to my desktop, so I'll click Extract. I'll go ahead and close this window, and now we have our extracted folder here. Let's go ahead and open it up and look at it. So you'll notice in here, we have some secondary file information, the logo, some other images, but we most importantly have a copy of our workspace here called Introduction to Publishing. And inside that are all of my files I'm going to be needing. So let me go back up here, and what I'd like you to do is right click on Introduction to Publishing and copy that. Now what I'd like you to do is navigate to your Documents folder, and you should have a folder called Alpha Anywhere V12. This was created when the system is loaded and operates for the first time. Now you can save this anywhere you would like, but I traditionally like to save it inside of this folder. So I'm going to double click in here. In my case, I have an archive with a bunch of other projects, but I'm going to go ahead and right click here and say Paste. And what that will do is it will paste into this folder that project, and all of my projects will have a different folder, and below those folders will all be the detailed information for that project. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and double click on Introduction to Publishing. You'll see that there is a Alpha logo, and you can double click on that. That will start up our Alpha Anywhere environment. You'll notice that since you have not opened this before on your machine, Alpha Anywhere needs to take a few moments to analyze the project and structure things for its need. So click OK. You may get this message, which means there is a newer release available. In that case, you can, if you would like, download this, but not necessary for our needs today. So I'm going to click Close. And now we have everything ready to go to start our training. I'm going to go ahead and do two things. I'm going to go ahead and expand this here, and I'm going to go ahead and start my development server by clicking on there. You'll notice I didn't get any messages, but if you get a message, just click OK and make sure it goes to green. Then we know everything's ready to go. Now on other projects, we have to worry about the Alpha DAO connection string in terms of we provide an access file that's used for the training. In our case, we're going to be using an online database, so you don't have to worry about that. And we'll cover that in a little more detail in a next lesson. We're going to start our hands-on training by taking a few moments just to discuss what is publishing in regards to the Alpha Anywhere system. Publishing is the process of taking your development files and moving them onto a Alpha Anywhere application server so they can be accessed by your clients, either through desktop web or mobile or any number of combination of those. So what publishing is really a combination of moving, but also more importantly, configuring things so that it's going to work correctly on that environment. So let's talk a little bit more about what's going on there. So on the left-hand side, you'll see we have our Alpha Anywhere IDE. This is where you're doing your development, and that's up to now probably where you've been spending most of your time. On the right-hand side, you have the Alpha Application Server. This is where you need to have the files so that outside people can access your system or application. So you're developing things like components, pages, grids, UXs, etc. You're also putting in there other files such as CSS, HTML, images, and also things like XBasic, etc. Now, when you go to publish, you actually set up a series of settings in regards to how you want it to work on that target environment. And then you move that over onto the Alpha Application Server environment so it can be used by your clients through web browser or mobile device, etc. And that's publishing. It's a combination of moving it, but also setting those files and those environmental variables so everything will work correctly. Now, the first thing we're going to do here is focus on what's called local publishing. And this is a unique aspect and actually very, very helpful from the development standpoint. So let's check this out. You'll see that the Alpha Anywhere IDE actually has a full-blown Alpha Application Server built into it. So your IDE that you've been using actually behind the scenes has the full Alpha Application Server, and it's all wrapped up into a single installation on your local machine. Now, through your web projects control panel, etc., you have a local development folder that has all the different files and things that you've been developing in. And you can use things to do working previews, etc., within the development environment. But you can also do what's called a local service or local web root publish, where it's going to move those items into a local server folder, setting some settings along with it. And then once it's in that local server folder, you can actually open up your application in your web browser right on your local machine and test it there. And this is a very powerful tool because it allows you to understand how the application is going to work once it's running on the application server, and allows you a better way to debug, validate, check, etc. your system. So what we're going to do now is walk you through that process, explain the different elements of how the Alpha Anywhere IDE and application server work together on your local machine, how you set that up, and also different ways for you to publish to your local server folder. Then in a future part of our lesson, we'll actually go into how we can use the same methodologies to move that onto an external server environment. So for our first exercise, we're going to be doing a local publish. And this allows you to test your application on your local machine. Before we do that, let's check a few quick things. First, we want to make sure our development server is enabled. And as you can see here, it's currently disabled, meaning it's got a little red icon here. So I'm going to click here, and that will start my server. You'll notice now that it has a green icon, which means that the server has started. Now, if you get an error during this process, which can happen especially on a new installation, it may be possible there's a port conflict. Let's go to Web Development Server. Now this is where you can manage your local development server. Specifically, the most important thing to look at is the server port. And you'll notice my port is currently 1580. So some systems have port 80 already taken up by another application, usually IIS or something along those lines. You can adjust this port. You can then stop and restart the server until you get the server to a running state. And that is usually almost always the issue of a server port conflict. And you can change this at will whenever you want to modify what port it's actually operating on. So let me go ahead and close this. Once you've confirmed that the developer server is on, you're good to go. Now let's check one other thing. In our application, as we saw in the demonstration, we're actually connecting to a data source. Let me go ahead and open up Customer UX here. And I'm going to go ahead and open up List of Customers. Now you'll notice I'm using a connection string here to connect to my database. It's called CONN. And that was done during the development of this UX. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel here. I'm going to go back to my Web Projects control panel. And what I'm going to do is go to Tools, Alpha DAO Connection Strings. And you'll see here is our connection string CONN. Now you'll also notice a couple things. First, this is a SQL Server connection string. It is actually pointed to my server, so when I'm even running here locally, it's communicating off my machine and going to the server. And in here is the server address, the username, a password that is encrypted, and the port and the name of the database. So all of that's set up, and I did that on purpose to make life a little easier in terms of not having to install a database. You can just test it against mine. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now what I'd like to do is click Publish. And now I'm ready to publish to my local system. Now you'll notice that we already have something here called Local Web Root. And that is by default built in and available in the system when you first start. So whenever you create a new workspace, it's going to have a local web root publishing profile. Now let's take a look at that in a little more detail. I'm going to click this little Add Edit Profiles button and open that up. And this is my local web root publishing profile. So you'll see this is where we can modify certain things, which we'll do at this time. The first thing I'd like you to do is look at Target Folder. When we publish this, and I'll show it to you a little more detail in a few minutes, we want to actually put this into a folder on my local machine. And I want each project to have its own folder for its local web root profile. Otherwise, you'll end up overwriting files from different projects. So I'd like you to go ahead and click on Target Folder and type Intro to Publishing. And that is going to be the name of the folder that's going to be on the local machine. Next, we want to select our default page. Go ahead and select the 3 ellipsis button. And let's select Index, which is our primary default page. And click OK. There are a number of other settings here, but I usually don't need to do any kind of modifications to it. Those are my most important things I want to do on my local web root profile, is set the target folder and then set the default page. Once you're satisfied that those are set correctly, click OK. And if you ever need to edit that, you can always click this little icon to edit it there. Now, I want to do the following. You'll see currently it's saying current file. I actually want to publish all of my files in my project. This will make sure that it's going to try and publish all files. Next, what I want to do is currently you'll see we have a checkbox here for publish new or modified files. I want to disable that. And we'll talk a little bit more about this at a later point in our training. But in this case, I want to force publish everything in this system. If this is on, it's going to check to see if it's been published before and only publish things that have changed, which is really nice and something you'll want to use on an ongoing basis. But for now, let's uncheck that to make sure we get a clean publish. The other ones we really don't have to worry about now because we're not using security here. But I do want to click here, Launch Browser after files are published. And you'll notice it's already set to index.a5w, but if you want, you could change this to any one of your pages and click OK. So we're now ready to go. We have local web root, all files, uncheck Publish New or Modified, launch index.a5w. Ready to go? Go ahead and click the Publish button here. You'll notice that since I'm displaying a list of files to publish, it's showing me all the different things that are going to be published. Note if you're not interested in seeing that on an ongoing basis, you can disable that by just clicking here. But I'm going to leave it enabled for now. I'm going to click OK. Now, this is the first time I've published locally. So it's telling me, hey, I don't see that folder that you want me to put these files in. Do you want me to go ahead and create that folder? And in this case, the answer is yes. And when I do, it's going to go ahead and create that folder for me. Now what it's doing here is publishing my files to the local web root. So basically it's moving them out of my development environment into that folder that was created. And I get a message saying that has been completed. And again, if you don't want to see this message in the future, you can click here to say to disable that. Go ahead and click OK. And now we'll open up my browser with the index page. So if you've had a successful publish, you should see this page. And you'll see that it's actually here, and this is your URL. It's got that folder name, and it's launched index.a5w. Now click Enter the Enter System. And now you'll see you're at your dashboard home. And you can merely check it to make sure by clicking Customers, then Directory, and you should see these things here. Now, if you do see an error message at this point, especially with customers, you might see an error message saying it can't connect to the database. You might want to check and make sure that your ports are open and that it can access the server, because my server is actually up on the internet. So this web page is going to actually call out through the local server to gain access to that server. And at this point, we've done a successful initial publish, and you can now go into the system and make any changes and publish them locally on an ongoing basis. And I'll show you that a little bit more detail in our next lesson. Now that we've successfully published, let's do a couple things. Let me show you the next step, which is publishing an existing solution back to your local dashboard. So I'm going to go back into the Alpha environment. I'm going to open Home UX. So let's go ahead and open Home UX by double-clicking on it. Now, find the static text company dashboard. And you'll see it's just a matter of some static text with some HTML. So let's go ahead and open that up here. And let's go company system dashboard. So we're just making a little change to this particular UX. Once you've done that, click OK and click the Save button here. Now that we've saved our UX, let's go back to our Web Projects control panel by clicking on it here. And then let's go ahead and go back to our Publish button here and click Publish. Now, this is where we can fine-tune our publishing process. I could click All Files and Project, and it would do an All Files. And I could leave here Publish New and Modify, and it would only determine what has been changed. So let's do that. Go ahead and click All Files and Project. Let's leave Publish New or Modified Files Only checked. And let's go ahead and launch the browser again. Don't have to launch it. We could just go back in and refresh it, but let's do that for now. All Files, Publish New or Modified Only, launch index.a5w, and click Publish. So now you'll see that it is doing all these files. Now the reason it's doing there is because inside of Home, We've referenced other files, so it's smart enough to understand those pieces here. In the future, when you don't have as many dependencies, you'll see the file list is a bit shorter. Go ahead and click OK. The files are copied to your local system. Notice that we weren't asked about the folder because it existed, and now we're seeing a publish files complete. Click OK. You'll see that it opened up our browser. I can click Enter. And now our updated version is now on the system. You can see now it has company system dashboard on my local drive. In fact, if I go back to my previous opening UX here and just hit refresh, basically what it's going to do is reread into the browser those local files. And you'll see my changes here. So you don't necessarily have to relaunch the index or the page. You can mainly just go back in after you've done a publish and refresh, and it will show up there. I'm going to go ahead and close this because we don't need it anymore. So that's the way you can do it. Is once you start getting into a groove, you make modifications, you publish them, and you can view them very quickly. Now let's show a couple other nice little features. Let's go back into here, and let's go back into our customer UX. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's go to Home UX. And let's edit our static text once again. So I'm going to click there. I'm going to remove that system. Let's say that really wasn't what we wanted. So your static text should have company dashboard, and click OK. Now up to now, we've gone back to Web Projects Control Panel and done a publish there. But there's a shortcut. I can merely go here, click Save to save my changes. And then you'll notice there's a publish button right here on my control. So I can click here, and it basically launches the publish process as if I had gone to the Web Projects Control Panel and done it there. So now I can click OK. This will go ahead and execute the publish right within my component. I'm going to return to my browser here, do a refresh, and you'll see now it has that new change text. So inside of the Alpha development environment, there's some really fast and easy things to do to accelerate your development process, meaning you're not forced to go back to the Web Projects Control Panel and do all those elements there. You'll see that there's a publish button within the components and web pages to allow you to edit, publish, and check it out in a very short period of time. Now there's one other thing I want to show on this, is sort of a different method to publish an individual item. So as we did before, let's go ahead and edit our static text here by clicking the ellipsis button. And I'm going to rechange it back to system. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click Save. Now normally I'd do a publish here, or I'd go to the Web Projects Control Panel and do a publish here, but there's a third method. Basically, I'm going to go onto the Web Projects Control Panel. I'm going to right-click on the control that was changed, in this case, Home_UX. And you'll notice there is Publish Local Web Root. So I'll click that, and this is equivalent to me clicking it within the application itself, or within the UX control itself, and click OK. This now has published it. I can go back here, do a quick refresh of my website, and you'll see that file has been published here. So there's three major ways you can publish this item to the local system and do it very quickly. And this applies both to locally and also when we talk about the server publishing. You have these methods available to make your life a little easier. I'd like to explore a couple other areas involved with local publishing before we move on to our next steps. Let's go ahead and return to the Alpha environment here. And let's make sure you're at the Web Projects Control Panel. And let's go ahead and click the Publish button here. So as we talked about before, you can control what is published, either a current file, a selected list of files, or all files in project. I'm going to go ahead and select all files in project. You can also instruct the system whether it should keep an eye on whether files have been published or not. So the idea is that if you published it before, Alpha will know that and say, hey, it hasn't changed since then. And in that case, what it will do is not publish those changed items, thus accelerating the publishing process. So by disabling this, you're saying, hey, I want to do a full publish. But let's go ahead and keep that enabled right here. You'll see here we have clear publishing history. So if you would like, you can always click on here, and this allows you to clear the history and kind of reset things as if you were starting over. And you can do it just for this profile or for other profiles. And we'll be talking about multiple profiles a little bit later there. This published security, web security data is not really used in our situation because we don't have security on. But when you do have web security, you'll need to address that there. Of course, we have our launch browser. I'll go ahead and enable that, and index. So make sure you have all files in project, publish new and modify files only, and let's launch the browser. Now you'll notice there's a really cool feature here called Save These Settings as Your Quick Publish Settings. So let's go ahead and click that and enable it. So now when I click Publish, it's telling me what I'm going to publish. I click OK. Confirm, and it will open up our page and show us that. Now let's say we go back here and we make a bunch of changes to our system. So let's say I've edited a few things. I'll just go in here and save this again just to make sure it knows that it's been changed. I can go back to Web Projects Control Panel, and instead of having to hit Publish, you'll notice on the left-hand side we have the Quick Publish project. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and what it's going to do is execute the publish as if I had gone to publish and set those savings. It'll execute the publish as if I'd gone to the publish button, set all those settings, and hit publish. So it remembers my preferred publishing process. And this can save you a lot of time. So you just have to, when you're publishing, tell it to remember that. And then from then on, whenever you click Quick Publish, it's going to reuse those settings. Go ahead and click OK. And you'll notice because of my settings, it's reopening my index page here. So that's a nice little shortcut that's available in the system. I'd like to spend a few minutes just exploring what is going on behind the scenes. So first, let's look at what the URL is for our particular solution here. You'll see that it has the local server address called Alpha502 1580, which is the name of my local machine and the port it's on. Then you'll see there is my directory here called Intro to Publishing, and in this case it's actually showing my index.a5w page. Now when I click this button here, it takes me to another A5W page called home_ux.a5w. And that page contains my home_ux. And I use that naming process. Now, how did the system come up with this? Let's go back in and explore that a little bit more. So I'm going to go into Alpha. I'm going to go to the Web Projects Control Panel. Then go to Web Development Server. So you'll see here, this is the server name, and you can call it anything you want. It's up to you. By the way, you can also use 127.0.0.1 or localhost along with the port number. But in this case, it's the server name : port number. That's how that first part there. Now you'll notice below that is the document root. This is where the built-in Alpha development server looks for project files when it's running on the local system. And this directory was automatically created for you when you installed the system. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Windows file browser. Go ahead and navigate to the C drive. Yours is probably going to look a little different from mine. And then go into A5 webroot. So again, that's C:/A5 webroot. And again, yours is going to look a little different from mine. The most important thing I want you to look for is a folder called Intro to Publishing. This is that folder that was created when we did our first publish. The system looked in this directory and said, hey, I don't see that folder, therefore I'll create it for you. And then once it created that folder, I go in here, it's going to put all of the files. So as you can see in here, not only do we have, for instance, our UX components and images and things like that, but there's a whole bunch of other configuration files that are included with it. And that's an important criteria. Because of the way we publish, these files will often be a little different because they'll have different settings. And that becomes even more importantly when you're working with systems other than your local development environment. So as you can see, the folder is C-A5 Wedroot intro to publishing. And here, it's the server name, folder, and the file from there. So you can modify this location. This isn't set in stone. It's just the standard one. Probably no need to do that. But that's why it's super important for you when you set up your initial publishing profile. So when I go to publish and I click here, make the first thing you do to go in and set this target folder for this workspace. The reason why is that if you were to leave that empty, then it will publish it into the root of that directory and may possibly overwrite other things. So you always want to keep them in separate folders. It's just good practice, and it'll save you a little grief later on as you do projects from there. So that's an understanding of the development server, how it's set up and where the location of that web root is, and also the actual file structure that's created on the local system. And most importantly, this server port, because that determines when you run the web browser, what port is Alpha listening to on the local machine to be able to serve up these web pages and do other elements along those lines. And as we mentioned earlier on, that's where usually you might have an initial problem. You may need to change that from another port to another port if you have an existing system already using that port. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about your different options you have for doing publishing. When you go to create a new publishing profile, you're going to be offered a selection of different ways to publish your project. And I'm going to walk through each one of them quickly now just to give you a feel for what they mean. Now, the first one you're already familiar with, local. This is where you're deploying the files locally on your same development machine using the built-in development applications server. The next one is called LAN. This is a situation where the Alpha application server is running on a machine on the same network you are, and you can therefore access it through the local area network. And you see these kind of scenarios where maybe it's inside of a firewall and you have your development machine and then the IT group, or you've set up another server on that local LAN where you can connect directly through it to move files back and forth through the local area network. Now, the next one is called ISP remote. And that is the one we're going to actually focus the balance of this training on. But this is a traditional scenario where you have an external hosting environment and you're connecting that through FTP. So we're using FTP as the protocol to connect from your local machine to that server machine. And on that server machine is running the Alpha environment. And so you're moving your files through FTP up there, along with all the configuration and other pieces to be able to be used on that external machine. And again, we're going to spend the balance of our training to really focus on that aspect there. Now, another alternative is called HTTP, and this is a more modern version, and it's actually gaining a lot of adoption. It has, from a security standpoint, people are starting to move this direction where you can use the HTTP protocol to actually move your files from your local system to that environment. So it's very similar to ISP remote, but you're using a different protocol in this scenario. Now, another option is also called IIS. And this is a situation where you have the Alpha application server running on an IIS server. And there's a very specific way IIS uses to run applications and to actually install applications on that IIS server. And we're just piggybacking on top of that. So therefore, when you connect and deploy to IIS, it's a much different animal than ISP remote or HTTP. And we're not going to cover that in that course, but future courses are going to go into detail on how you can do that and how you can set it up and be successful at that. Now, last but not least is the Alpha Cloud option. And again, this is a much different animal than all the others there. Alpha Cloud is a hosted environment brought to you by Alpha Software, And the Alpha Cloud has an incredible amount of really powerful, I call them DevOps or developer operations capabilities. And therefore, the way you publish is much different from any of the other ones. And again, I will be covering that in future trainings because it's really cool. It takes a lot of work for you, and it opens up a lot of really cool things you can do with it. So again, we're going to focus on ISP remote, but now you should hopefully have a better understanding of the different potential ways you can create a publishing profile depending on the environment that you're targeting your publishing for. We're now ready to set up and publish our solution onto an external server. Now I've gone through and set everything up so that you can actually experience the process and see your published work. So let's start the process. Before, we clicked Publish and then clicked our little edit icon here. In our case, we're going to go access the publishing a different way. So go ahead and click Cancel. And what I'd like you to do is click the Profiles button up here in the left-hand corner. This opens up our web project profiles, and this is a central location that allows you to configure, update, and manage your publishing profiles. So click Add New Profile. We're going to use the ISP Remote profile since we're going to be using FTP, and click Next. Now what I'd like you to do is go ahead and enter the FTP information. I've already set up a login for you. So do so by typing in www.giantkillerdemo.com. So that's www.giantkillerdemo.com. Now your username is Introduction to Publishing. And the password is shown on the screen here and also in the lesson. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste that right here. Now, very important is make sure you enter that password exactly because it is case sensitive. Now, once you've set up the server username and password, you want to test the FTP login here by clicking Test FTP. You want to test the FTP login. Go ahead and click that. Very important that you do that because then you won't run into problems later on. But this basically is saying that your local development environment can successfully contact and talk to the server. Now click OK. We're ready to move to the next step. Click Next, and now it's asking us for the web folder. Now in my particular situation, I've already set up the folder on the server, and in our case we want to publish into the root folder, so we're just going to do a /. Now if you had multiple applications running on that server, you may want to put app 1, app 2, app 3, etc. And what will happen is when it publishes it, it will actually put it in a subfolder to the root. But in my case, just put in the /. We don't need a data folder and we don't need the server data folder here. These are not necessary in our particular situation. So once you've done that, click Next. Now this is the base URL. So this is the URL on the server when your application is running. So that is https://www.giantkillerdemo.com/introduction to publishing. Now it's important for us to put the fully qualified item in there, and I'll show you a little bit later why that's important. But it is an HTTPS server, putting in the server name, and we're putting in the particular folder I've structured and set up for your URL. We also select our startup page, and in our case index.a5w is correct, and we aren't publishing any data files or library files, not necessary. Once you've confirmed this, go ahead and click Finish. Now each profile will have a name, so let's just go ahead and put in Giant Killer Demo, because that's the name of the server in this case. You can use any naming convention you like, and click OK. So now you have your new profile. You'll have your local web root and your Giant Killer Demo profile. Now I want to do a couple other adjustments, and then we'll be able to do a test publish. So the first thing I want you to do is, you'll see that currently we're using FTP program internal optimize, and we're going to continue using that. But you'll notice there are two other settings here, FTP published with curl and curl using active mode. In our situation, we want to enable both of those. And the reason why is the way my FTP server is set up. Your environment may be different, but most often this is the settings you want to use. Now there's one other important thing we need to do, and we're going to come back and explore this a little bit more. But remember, in our system, we have a connection string that goes to our database. What we need to do is specify the connection string that the server should use. So go ahead and find named Alpha502 connection strings, click the ellipsis button, and this will open up our edit name connection strings. So you'll see that currently for Giant Killer Demo, we have only one connection string, and currently it's set to default value. Now if we leave this, we're going to get a little warning, so I want to actually change that. So go ahead and select connection default value, make sure Giant Killer Demo is selected, and click Edit Connection String. This will open up our string builder. Now, if you were in a real situation, and we'll come back and talk about this, you may have a different connection string you want to use on your server. In our case, for our first run, we're going to use the exact same connection string. So what I'd like you to do is click Edit Default Value. And all that does is copy in our default value here and click OK. So now what will happen is when Alpha publishes it to the server, it's going to include that connection string. So when the files run on the server, it uses that connection string. And again, we'll come back and show you how you can use a different one in a little bit. Click OK. And then we have one other adjustment. Go ahead and scroll down here. So you can see that it's set our FTP information. That's all good. Then you'll see it set our base URL, but you'll notice the server port is currently 80, and that's what's defaulted. Well, I'm an HTTPS, so the issue is that would give us a problem. So all I want you to do is go ahead and delete 80, tab out of it, and it'll put a 0 there. And that will address the issue of it using 443 instead of 80. So once you've adjusted the Alpha502 string, base URL is checked out, server port is modified, we can click OK and save this here. By the way, if you ever want to test your FTP settings, you can always click here and it will verify that your saved settings are working correctly. Let's go ahead and click OK. So now we're ready to do our first publish. And I'll do that in the next lesson. Now that our publishing profile is ready to go, we can publish. Click the Publish button here. That opens up our Publish Web Project dialog box. Currently it's set to local web root. Let's go ahead and select Giant Killer Demo. Now the system will use that profile to do the publishing. I do want to do all files. It should already know about all of my modified files, but just to make sure, just go ahead and uncheck this. This way we do a forced publish of all files. Then what I'd like you to do is click Launch Browser in Files or after files are published and make sure index.a5w. Now that we've set up that we're ready to publish all our files, we can now click Publish. So this is now compiling a list of all the files. Now it's showing us a list of files to publish. In our case, it's all files. Click OK. This is now zipping them into a single large zip file. And now it's moving that information onto the server. Now it's unpacking that zip file on the server. And if all of your settings are correct, you will see now files were published. Now, if this did not occur and you got an error, just go back and double check to make sure that the URL is correct along with the port information. Just double check that and that will get it fixed. Now click OK. It'll give us a message that everything's done and complete, and click OK. You'll notice now that it is opening up the web browser to our index page. And you'll notice that it's doing it on our server. And so now I can click to enter the system. This now opens up our files that are on the system. I can then go ahead and look at customers. And you'll see that basically it's running the same way we did here as local, but running up on our server. Click directory, and you'll see that that is also working correctly. So now that you have your publishing profile done, it's very easy to copy things to the server. So let's take an example real quick of changing something and watching the process one more time. So let's return to our Alpha environment. Let's go ahead and go to our web components and go to our home component and double click on it. Let's go ahead and go to our static text company system dashboard. Let's go ahead and click there and let's remove the word system. So now it should just say company dashboard. Click OK. Click Save. Now we could go back to the Web Projects Control Panel and do a full publish, or guess what? We can click Publish here, and you'll notice now it shows us both options are available to us to do publishing. So let's do Giant Killer Demo. Click that. This will open up the files that are to be published. Click OK. It zipped the changes, moved them up, unzipped them, and confirmed that everything is done. Click OK. And now we've completed a quick update publish to our server. Let's go check it out. Go back into Alpha. We're on our server in the control or in the browser. Go ahead and click a reload to reload this. And you'll notice now our company system dashboard says company dashboard. Now in my case, I still have another tab open, which is pointed to my local system here. So let me do a refresh there. And you'll see it's still showing company system because I haven't published that update to my local environment. I only published it to my server. So that covers the initial publishing of your application and a quick update publish. Now we're going to cover a few other topics that will be very interesting to show you how you can control the publishing process. Now I'd like to cover a very important topic. It has to do with the Alpha DAO connection strings. I'm going to go ahead and click Customers here. And you'll notice that I'm currently working on my Giant Killer Demo external server. Now I'm going to go here to my local one and I'm going to do the same thing. And you'll notice that I'm seeing the same data in both locations. The system is different because I changed the header, but the data is the same. And the reason why is when I published to my server, I told it to use the exact same connection string for both my local and my server. But that often is not going to be the situation. Most often you're using a development server or database in your development environment. And then when you go to the server, you're using another database, maybe validation or production. So let's show you how you do that. I'm going to go back into Alpha. I'm going to go ahead and go to my Web Projects Control Panel. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Profiles here to reopen that. Now I'm going to select my Giant Killer Demo profile. Now you'll notice we talked about earlier, you have what is called named Alpha DAO connection strings. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And as we did before, I clicked on Giant Killer Demo connection and click Edit Connection String. I clicked Edit Default Value, and that basically copied the exact same connection string here. So now when it does this publish, it's using this connection string. But I actually have two databases available on my server. So what I'd like you to do is the following. Click Build Connection String. This will open up your connection string. Make sure not to change anything, but go to database right here and type the word production after the name. So it should be Introduction to Publishing Production. And this is mimicking the idea of I have two identical databases, but the content of them are different because one's a development database, the other's production. Now, to make sure everything's good, you can test the connection here and make sure it says succeeded. And that will confirm that you put in the correct database name. Click OK. Click OK. So now we have a different connection string that will be operational when it's on that server. So let's click OK. This will take us back to our Edit Name Connection Strings dialog box. Click OK. And finally click OK. So now we've updated our profile, so we'll use that different connection string. Let's test it out. Let's do a publish here. Let's do an all files. Don't worry about checking this because really all we're going to be publishing is a small set of items, which are configuration elements. and don't need to launch the browser since we have it already open. We'll just click Publish. Notice that it's only putting in a small series of items up there, and primarily this is the application A5i file, which contains that information, and click OK. As you can see, it's very fast because there's not much going up to the server. Click OK, and click OK. Now let's go back to our web browser. Make sure you're pointed at the Giant Killer demo, and let's just do a refresh. Now this reloaded the system, and let's click Customers. And you'll notice we're now seeing different information in here. Everything else is the same, but we're now, because we're connecting to a different database, I basically just deleted a bunch of records in this particular table. So if I go to my local, do a customers here, you'll see that the customers start from 1 and go down from there. On my production, it starts at 31 and goes from here. And that's an important concept. Most often you're going to set up your local development database, a validation database, and a production database, and you can have 3 different publishing profiles pointed to 3 different database environments. And you're not limited to just one connection string. Each of your applications could have multiple connection strings. Now let's cover one other quick thing. I'm going to go back into my Alpha environment. I'm going to click Profiles here. I'm going to click Giant Killer Demo. Now, as we mentioned, we changed the named Alpha DAO connection string. And that's your connection string to your data sources, one you're going to use on almost every application you do. But notice there are other connection strings. There is storage connection strings. This is where you can set up connections to Amazon S3 or Azure. And like named Alpha DAO connection strings, you can have one set of storage for your development environment, and then when in production, use a whole different set of storage connection strings for different storage environments when you're there. Now the other element here is SQL reporting. You can also have the same similar situation. During development, using certain SQL Server reporting, up there, use a different one. And also a very important one called named resource providers, and this has to do with web APIs. You may have a set of test web APIs you're using during development. Now, when you go to your production, you actually want to put different API endpoints in there, and that's what you can do with named resource providers. They all essentially work the same. Basically, you're just doing a remapping when you're moving it to this new environment. But this provides a lot of power for you to set all this up. Once it's set up, you don't have to worry about it. When it publishes, it's going to use those settings every time. And thus, you can set up different environments, different profiles with different connection strings, and everything works great. I'd like to spend a few minutes explaining your different FTP options. In particular, I'm going to cover 3 topics. First is the optimized method. The second is the FTP folder setup. And the third is FTP program. Let's go ahead and focus on optimized method first. Now, when we went through the publishing demonstration, we talked about the fact that on your local IDE, your local development machine, you have components, pages, other files, and settings. And what we're doing is moving that content from your Alpha Anywhere IDE up to your target environment, i.e. an Alpha application server running off your machine. But it's not that simple, really. There's some neat things that are going on that I want to explain. And it has to do with optimized. Let me explain. So we have our Alpha Anywhere IDE, again, with our 3 types of elements here. Now, before the IDE actually sends the information to the application server, it takes a moment and zips them up into a single zip file. Then it moves that zip file along with a couple other files up to the application server. Now, once it's on the application server, it runs a process that will take that zip file and expand it out into the files in the manner that are needed to run at that time. And this is called the optimized process. And the important thing about this is it's a significant performance improvement. When you're uploading through FTP, if you have one monolithic large file, it will transfer much faster than a whole bunch of small files. And there's actually a lot of files that are involved with an Alpha solution. So this is what you can see on the back end. You'll see we have our zip file. We'll see we have an unpack.a5w. That's the little script that will unzip that and put the files where they need to go. And then you see we also have some security files. And so this is what it looks like before that is triggered. Now the next thing I'd like to talk about is the FTP folder. When you install the Alpha application server, it will automatically create a folder on your server called C:A5 webroot. And this is where it's expecting to run your applications out of. Now this can be changed, but this is the default. And you can see here's what it looks like. You have that A5 webroot, and then you have different folders that have different pieces. And one of them is our introduction to publishing. So we need to put the files in there, and then when we access it, we're using that sub sort of URL level to access those files. When we did our publish folder demonstration, you'll notice that we just used a backslash. And the reason why is we have already mapped to the directory we want to go on the server. And that's a fact of how my FTP server works. But in your case, that may be different. If, for instance, you're using a standard FTP and it maps to the root, then you're going to need to actually put in the path to get to the A5 webroot. So if you're going to the root of the A5 webroot, it would be /A5 webroot. And if you have a specific application, it would be that path and also the application name. So the key here is that you just need to understand where your FTP is and then how you map it out from there. So in my case, I have everything pointed to that A5 webroot, and when you log in with my FTP that I provided you, everything's mapped, and therefore I use that backslash. Now the last thing I'd like to go over is FTP program. There are three options. The first one's called built-in FTP program. So built into Alpha Anywhere is a full FTP program that allows you to move the files and connect to an FTP server and move those files up. But you can also use an external FTP program, and this may be a certain requirement depending on your environment or your preferred methodologies. The last one is called prompt at runtime, which basically asks you which method you would like to use and gives you flexibility on the fly to decide. In our next lesson, I'm going to dive into this a little bit more deeper and just kind of show you some of the options and the impact of those choices as you use the overall IDE to publish your environment and files to the target server. First thing I'd like to explore is the optimized process. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Let's click Publish, and we can click the little Edit button to open that. You could, of course, click Profiles, whichever you prefer. Now you'll notice that currently we're using internal optimized. That is the methodology that will do the zip file and move it up from there. I'm going to go ahead and select this, and you'll see we're using the built-in FTP program with Optimize. So I'm going to actually turn that off. Then I'm going to click OK. So now our profile will still use FTP internally, but won't use the optimized method. And let's go ahead and watch that. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to say All Files. I'm going to check off this because I want it to publish everything. And then let's go ahead and launch our browser afterwards. And now that we've set that, I'll click Publish. First thing it does is collect the files to be published. Here's a list of files to be published. As you can see, there's a lot of little files that are involved with this. So now I'm going to click OK. And now it's doing the transfer immediately. Now notice it's taking a little longer this time than before to transfer it. And you can see it's actually transferring individual files. Now before, our publish was already done with that single zip file. So as you can see, there's a significant savings, especially when you have a larger number of files. Now all the files have been transferred to the server. And in this case, it's not going to unpack those files because they're ready to go. So I can click OK. And you'll see it opens up my server and everything's ready to go. But I didn't show you, I kind of shortened it there in terms of how long it took. And it can become painful when there's a lot of CSS files, etc. So I highly recommend that when you set up your publishing profile, you make sure to select Optimize. Okay. I do want to demonstrate one thing that you'll run into. So let me go back into the publish and edit it. When you're doing this, the most important thing is right here, open page after publish. To have Alpha go up to the server and unpack those files, it needs to reach that directory. So if this is wrong here, you will get an error. In fact, let me go ahead and show you that. I'm going to go ahead and put in a wrong directory here. And I'm going to click OK. So I'll just do all files, and I'm going to do a publish. So it's a smaller set of files. I'm going to click OK. It's going to zip the files. It's going to send them up. So you're going to see the FTP working correctly, but watch what happens after. You'll get this message, basically saying the server did not respond. The IDE reached out to try and find that unpack little A5W page to run the process to unzip things, but it couldn't find that. And so if you see this message, you know where to look. Now you'll also notice that it's telling you that the publish history is only updated when the FTP is successful. So you don't have to worry about, oh, do I have to keep tracking stuff? It's going to do that for you. But what you need to do is go in, and if you see that error, work out why that happened. And the common errors are, first, this URL is incorrect. Secondly, that the server port is off. And that's why we changed it before, because we're using HTTPS. If I put 80 here, I'd get the same situation here. So that's one thing to know about internal optimized, is just make sure that's good to go from there. Okay. Now what I'd like to do is talk a little bit more about the FTP folder. So I'm going to go into my profiles, and I'm going to go to my Giant Killer demo. So as we talked about in the last section, when we set up our folder here, it is a /. And the reason why is because this username and password with my FTP server points right to where I want it to go. And if you have an opportunity to do that, it makes life much easier. But let's say in our case, or in another case, when you log in via FTP, it points to the C folder. So I would have need to have done this. I would have put A5 web root / and then introduction to publishing. And that would translate to C:\A5 web root introduction to publishing on the other side. So always test your FTP settings before you try to publish, and realize what is the server mapping going on, and that will help you dictate what the right folder structure should be. So let me go ahead and go back and set that there. Okay. Now the last thing I'd like to cover is the FTP program. So we've already covered two things, built-in and optimize. But we also have something called external FTP program. Now, the reality is this would be cumbersome in terms of going through this process you'll see in a few moments, but there is a really interesting reason you would want to use this. So let me go ahead and click that and click OK. So now watch what happens. I'll click OK. I'll do a publish, and I'll click the publish button. Again, it's going to show you what it's going to publish, and I click OK. Now, you'll notice it didn't try and do the FTP transaction. What it did is it created a folder on your local machine here with everything that was going to be put onto the server. And you'll see right here, this is that folder. In fact, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go here and paste, and check it out. Inside this folder are all the files that would have been published to the server for this publishing. Notice not everything, because I did an incremental publish, but it would be everything. Now I could then go into my external FTP program, point to this folder, point to the server, and go from there. And this might be a requirement of an enterprise that requires certain types of clients that will be able to go to FTP. But there's another really neat feature about this. I can take everything in this folder, zip it up, put it on a thumb drive, and then go physically to that server and install it manually. And we've had situations before where people, they're very high secure environments, and you cannot connect in via FTP or HTTP or anything. So people have used this methodology to basically export all their changes locally, zip them up, and then go through a process of manually moving them onto the server. And these are for very high security environments that we've run across before. So that's an alternative reason why you would use the external FTP publishing aspect. Now, you'll notice down here it says yes or no whether they were transferred, because Alpha wants to know, hey, were you able to get those onto the server? Because if you were, I'm going to remember that, and the next time I don't need to republish those files. And in my case, I'm going to say no because I didn't do it, and that basically updates the internal tracking of files. And it's also saying, well, if you don't need that, you can go ahead and delete that temporary folder. And it's also telling me it didn't update it there. So I'm going to go back into my profile, go to my Giant Killer demo, and reset it to built-in. Prompt at publish time, basically it gives you a choice which one you would like to do, so you can on the fly decide that, and that just gives you a little bit more flexibility. So that covers our FTP program. It also covers our FTP folder, and last but not least, the internal optimized functionality, along with some of the key things you need to know about those. Thank you so much for taking the Alpha502 Introduction to Publishing with Alpha Anywhere. In this course, we covered the very important publishing process. The key topics we covered were explaining in detail the Alpha Anywhere publishing process, local publishing for verification and test, detailing the different methods you can use to publish your Alpha Anywhere application. We had a hands-on example where you published to a test server using a built-in sample project, and that was a live test server. Discussing setting environmental items for publishing to different environments, and general publishing techniques and best practices. Your next step in your Giant Killer training is our more advanced courses. If you would like to learn how to build beautiful web dashboards, you can take Alpha Anywhere 106, Introduction to Web Dashboards with Alpha Anywhere. If you would like to focus on how to build web API systems using Alpha Anywhere, you can take Alpha 300, Introduction to Web Services using Alpha Anywhere. These courses are built to be able to be taken in any order as you see fit. Finally, I really want to thank ZebraHost, the premier Alpha Anywhere hosting company, for sponsoring this course. ZebraHost is your go-to company when you need to host Alpha Anywhere applications. They have the experience, support, and expertise to make sure your Alpha Anywhere application runs smoothly and without worries.